What's up, everybody? This is Mico, the entrepreneur, and today we have a really good interview. These are the two former owners of, I call it DSD, Doorstep Delivery. We're waiting on Will to pop in. He's a very busy man. So, right now we have Andrew.
Hey,
Now,
hey.
before I get started, I just want to showcase I still have my polo. I couldn't find my name tag, but I have this polo. This is probably, how can I say it? This is like a time capsule, right? I started in 2008. It's been a long time. And for me to have this shirt, you know that this company was something. I also have two t shirts that I sleep in and wear around the house. I kept these because maybe I knew one day I will have this interview. This is crazy. Now, before I get into asking questions and we get into this good conversation, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you get your popcorn because this is about to be interesting. In 2008, when I first moved to Orlando, I saw an ad in the paper or somewhere online, and I replied to it, and they were looking for delivery drivers for this new startup. It's like, okay. I, I mean, just coming here to Orlando. So I went and I met Andrew. I was his first driver. And I mentioned that in other videos when I kind of joke about DoorDash or Uber Eats or whatever. I was his first driver. That's all I got.
Yeah,
but
way before they even existed.
but I just want to go into it a little bit that being a startup, just like everyone else, when they get started as a business, he started out at his garage. I remember that when orders were placed, he had a garage full of water, bottled water, and cans of drinks. And we had to take maybe it was like four or five different flavors. So we
Mhm,
had to take six packs
mhm,
and made now I want to say a case of water, but we had to have at least 6 to 12 waters on hand every day.
mhm.
And our system was they text us the order. Hey, go pick up at Olive Garden. Go pick up here. This is what you have to pick up. Then we had to text back saying that we had the order or something like that. And then they gave us the address. Now, this is way different from DoorDash, Uber Eats, Instacart, and all the other gig apps. This is, I mean, we're talking 2008. Let me speed it up. So I left 2016 and then, no, I came 2008. I had a hiccup and I went back to Chicago for some months and then I came back. When I came back the second time around, DSD, Doorstep Delivery, changed. Now they're with DDI. He's not out of his house anymore. He grew. He's at a different location with a team of people. Because I think he had like one or two people, if I'm not mistaken, dispatchers.
Two people.
I come I come back like it's a team of people with managers and I'm and dispatching orders. They still dispatching orders. It's amazing how a company as a startup, I come back and it grew. We're gonna go ahead and get because I have it is a lot that we got to talk about, but I'm trying to tie it in to the customer and driver movement, and that's going to be towards the end. So I know you have these companies that are tech companies now. Now, Andrew, when you started DSD, were you labeled as a food delivery company or were you labeled as a tech company?
We were definitely a food delivery company. So the business has evolved quite a bit over the years, and I mean, you think back to what the world was like in 2008. There was no iPhones, there were no apps. Believe it or not, Michelle, before we all got together, there were other cohorts using Nextels to communicate with their drivers. This was before you could even text to your driver. Back then, we were faxing the order to the restaurant, and then you'd call to make sure they received it. Half the time, they'd say, "What do you mean? We're out of paper. You're the only person who faxes us." So we definitely went through a lot of evolution to get where we were going. And to be frank with you, when the business turned into a tech business, that's when you really figured out who, that's where we separated the men from the boys. And we needed to make some major changes. And I think that's true in any business you have is you've got to evolve, you've got to adapt, you've got to embrace technology, and you got to continue to get better. Otherwise, you're going to get left behind. The world's going to change and you need to change with it. Otherwise, it's not going to end well.
Now, faxing the order at the time, you said at times they didn't receive the order. Now, I remember when, and I, audience, I kid you not, if you think that right now DoorDash and Uber Eats will give you 2 to 3 orders at a time, it's been times where we had 6 to 7 orders, and I'm not exaggerating. The first thing a dispatcher said to me was, okay, put it in your hot bag. You need to go get the other order. And you're thinking to myself, how am I carry all this? We had to have at least 2 to 3, the big catering bags. And I kid you not, still to this day, I have my big black catering bag that I purchased from DSD and the pizza bag. It was not common. Like it was not the norm. I was like 6 orders, sometimes from 6 different restaurants because you were in that area. And they would text you or say, hey, can you go grab that order while you right there? Well, I don't have enough room in my bag.
So, Michelle, I got to tell you, this are all examples. You and I were just talking a little bit here before we got rolling, and these are all examples of things that are uh, inappropriate to ask somebody to do. That when you have a business that you're trying to start, you're just doing the best you can. So, when we were talking to the restaurants, we would tell the restaurant that every once in a while we do a double. We typically don't exceed having 2 restaurants in that driver's car at the same time, and when we do, it's because they're close together and the customers should be close together. And, so there was a philosophy behind it. But once you get into the action and it's Sunday night, which is the busiest night of the week, and things are going gangbusters, the dispatchers are doing the best they can to calm things down and get things to the customer. And I got to tell you, to get where we got, realizing we were starting in 2008, we went through a lot of unreasonable situations, and that's one of them.
I can imagine. Um, Now, I wanted to know how often did, and I know Will is not here to answer, but how often were you a driver to make sure that things were improved, stayed on top of it, so you didn't lose that customer service that
Mhm.
DSD was built on?
So, Will and I, we were a great team and we had a different skill set in a lot of ways. There was some overlap, but there were some things that, he definitely was better at and some other things that I enjoyed more. And so we kind of had an understanding that, first of all, if there was ever an interruption on the dispatching side or in the office, that was his responsibility. He dealt with the technology side of things. That was my least favorite part of the business, and so he was able to dispatch, and he did that on occasion. You only need one dispatcher, so that was always him. And I would always be the first guy to volunteer to hop in my car and go drive. Um, at the beginning, We certainly drove more than we wanted to. Oftentimes you would get those spikes, right? And so now think about this, Michelle, when you first joined us, we probably only had 2 drivers per shift,
Mhm.
right? Think
Mhm.
about that now, right? 2 drivers per shift. So imagine if it's raining, it gets cold. What if somebody doesn't show up? All of a sudden, you really feel it, right? And so that's where Will and I would both jump in and drive. So again, as much as he did the dispatching side, there were times where both of us were jumping in to drive, usually on a weekend, usually when it was raining. We always drove on Valentine's Day and the Super Bowl, right? These are the 2 busiest, and the Super Bowl is even only for the first half, and then things calm down a little bit. But if people don't know, Valentine's Day is the busiest night of the year, and our girlfriends, now wives, understood back then that we celebrate Valentine's Day a day before or a day after because we're
Yep.
driving deliveries on Valentine's Day. We broke some serious records on Valentine's Day. But to your point, it was about managing the estimated delivery time.
Mhm.
So essentially, in our software, we had a function where the dispatchers could adjust the estimated delivery time, and we would basically have them call us when it got over a certain amount of time. So
Okay.
that might have started out being an hour, and over time, frighteningly enough, it got over 2 hours. There were
Mhm.
times where we were doing 2.5 hour deliveries because we couldn't keep up with the demand, right? A combination of a growing business with demand growing and a rainy day and just not having enough drivers, or realizing that our structure has independent contractor drivers where, we just did the best we could.
Thank you for that. So now I know working with DoorDash and Uber Eats, they have misclassified drivers when they first started. So we thought we were independent contractors, delivery drivers. And over time, they misclassified us. So did you, okay, it's going to lead to my next question after this. I'm sorry. So when you hired me in 2008, was I an independent contractor?
Yes.
Okay.
So I guess it's what, do you want me to let you use the incorrect language and say hired you or contracted with you?
Okay. There you go.
So here's the deal. So when you say misclassified and you talk about other companies, it's different. Each situation is unique. So there are certain rules associated with being an independent contractor that need to be obeyed, and over time it got harder and harder to obey those rules. And drivers started standing up in union type situations and demanding different working conditions, which affected the way the companies could operate the business. So for example, we never had a schedule where we could force somebody to work. We would ask the driver, when would you like to be on the schedule? The driver would put themselves on the schedule, right? And those is like some of those little details. So it really just meant we didn't have any control, which made it very challenging. And that's why you have owners jumping in to drive, because you couldn't afford to pay somebody to sit around for when the spike occurs. But we, so let me go back and be 100% truthful here. So at the very beginning, when we first met you, we were probably doing things in an uncompliant fashion. Okay, we
Yes.
we learned a lot very quickly, and we understood the rules. We were actually taught the rules before we started, so I don't remember how seriously I took certain things like using the right terminology. That if you don't know, there was a big lawsuit at the end that I'll tell you about.
Okay.
Um, and so we connected with DDI, which stands for Delivery Drivers Incorporated, out of California, that had created what they believed was a compliant structure to have the appropriate relationship with delivery drivers as independent contractors. and it had to be structured in a very specific way. And there were, I think, 11 rules, or I can't remember how many, but certain bullet points that you had to meet in order to be compliant. And it became very serious, probably in about 2011 or so. I don't remember the year specifically. And shortly thereafter, there was a time where Grubhub got sued for, I think, over $100 million. And that's when things started getting very serious. And again, they
Mm.
were handling the business differently than we were. We were actually a
Mhm.
lot more compliant and straight up than they were. But there's still a lot of gray area that I'm sure a lot of regulators hate about this business.
Okay. That was very interesting. I never knew that about Grubhub.
They were
I
the
think
first one to get hit. And
okay.
yeah, it was a law firm basically put together a class action lawsuit with a lot of drivers and deemed that they were being handled as employees, not independent contractors. And what that actually meant, this is really important actually, what that meant, and if you understand, when you're in business long enough, you look at the legal system very differently, right? It's not,
Mhm.
I'll just tell you, it's not about who's right or wrong. It's about where the leverage is. And so you have a company that made 20 to 30% of $100 million on a driver case. And so if you're that attorney, what do you do next? You turn around and you sue everybody else in the industry because you got $30 million to play with, and you say, there's no way I'm not going to go get at least one more of these. How much money am I willing to spend, and how much time am I willing to spend suing every single restaurant delivery service in the country? So you start with a list of the biggest ones. We were number six, the sixth biggest in the country. And that's when we got sued.
Wow. Wow. Now I know in the beginning of this interview, I'm not sure if I mentioned in detail that both you and Will, I probably said something, are former owners of Doorstep Delivery. Before, after I came back and you went with DDI, how many other owners you had to join
So yeah,
Doorstep
I'll tell
Delivery?
you a little bit about the evolution here. So Michelle, you are literally the first driver of doorstep delivery ever. Okay. Now, the evolution of the business, we actually started after we met a gentleman out of Gainesville named Tom Colangelo and his partner Dan Sinor, and they had a company called Gator Food out of Gainesville, and Knoll Food turned into Capital City Food up in Tallahassee. And when we all got together, the way it really worked is Tom would help people get started with these businesses by telling them just a little bit, and he would watch all of the different companies he started on a software. He would watch their numbers every day and every week. And to be frank, we were the new guy in town starting at about number 42. And when we overtook Tom and became number one on the whole list, that's when our phone rang. And Tom and Dan came down to meet us in Orlando, and we decided to put all four heads together and create one company. We decided to have one name and go nationwide, and sell franchises as well as start corporate locations. And so from that point on, there were essentially four main owners. But I will just let you know, each branch was individually owned. So Orlando, for example, was just Will and I. Gainesville was just Tom and Dan, and then all the corporate
Nashville.
look Nashville. So we brought in other, yeah, we brought in other owners in Nashville. We had some change out there in the middle. So we did two different models. One is we sold franchises where you typically get royalties, and the other was creating corporate partnerships. And really, what that meant was the four of us would own the majority of the business, and we would bring in a fifth operating partner. So, for example, in Nashville, where I think you worked as well, we started with two gentlemen out there that we helped get started. They very quickly became one person, not two, and we would own the majority of that business, but which is important because we have to have rights to the name and potentially
Mhm.
packaging the whole thing together one day, which we did. And that was one of the models we used. I'll just say Nashville was a unique branch. Nashville evolved a lot. It started as a partnership and turned into one of the only branches that we had 0% ownership in, but still control over from a name and IP standpoint.
Wow.
It was it. I guess it's all fun and games now. I'll just shout out to Ray. Ray. Love you, Ray. Ray, we've got an interesting relationship with Ray out there in Nashville. We're all happy to make money together, and we all approach things a little differently and like to have a good time and laugh while we're doing it. And whew, sometimes people they know how to push your buttons.
So in 2016, when I finally left Orlando and moved to Nashville, I that's when I met Tracy Barkley.
Okay.
So she was actually there and running it, and she mentioned Ray, but I never like seen him or met him. He was like a name in the sky. Like I always heard about him, but I never met him. We always dealt with her, and so
Ray was the only owner we had that used to fire customers.
what?
Oh yeah, you know how sometimes people get a little, they're upset because their food's late, cold, and wrong, or no sauce, etc. Right? And they call the office and they're a little upset. Yeah, well, he would just tell them that he would think it might be better next time if they just didn't order.
Wow, I wish I could have met him.
Yeah, got to hand it to him. He grew a heck of a business. He was a walking salesman. He was very charismatic, and he was a former pharmaceutical rep. And he's funny. Everybody has their own way of doing it. Some people
Right.
are very detail oriented, and they'll get into the nuts and bolts of the statistics and the commissions and all this. And,
Mhm.
everyone has their own style. Ray would walk in and go, hey, I'm doing this delivery thing, and think you should get on board. And that worked for him.
Wow.
So, whatever works.
So before I get into my little tidbit about Nashville, now the logo, I always thought these were wings, but can you tell people what this really is?
I can. First, I saw at the beginning you were showing all your shirts, and I just wanted to give a shout out here to my partner Will, who hasn't been able to make it yet. But this is the original logo that he drew as an artist the night before we really got started with the business. So we had discussed, and he had sketched out superheroes flying pizza straight to you, with the arms stretched out like this, with the cape flowing in the back, right? And it was awesome. And we were going to rock it. And I showed up to his house the next day, and he had drawn this little guy and said, "What do you think of the Running Man?" He said, "Heck yeah." So we ran with that for a while
Mhm.
until, again, things evolve. Once we had enough branches and a marketing budget, we ended up connecting with a marketing company that built out all of the marketing pieces that we did,
Mhm.
and they rebranded us. And so they wanted to come up with new logos and a new look. And we actually call it the brown paper bag look that usually goes behind all this stuff.
Mhm.
I think I may have one in here, but certainly in the other room. Let's see if I got one. Yeah, not quick enough. But anyway, we had the brown paper bag look in the background of everything, and those were the guys that created the new logo. And yeah, sure enough, I keep grabbing the wrong side of my shirt here because I'm looking in the mirror. But they brought this to us, and at first we didn't. We're kind of like, it kind of looks like Mini Cooper or Bentley. Like, what's going on here, right? And then we kind of dug in, and we're like, oh my gosh, It's a plate. It's not a flying plate. It's a flying plate with forks. We got forks coming out of both sides as the wings on the plate with the D's, and there's actually two D's. So it's the double D's on the plate with the flying forks to get you your food as quickly as possible, hot with the right sauces, accurate order, and if you're lucky, you'll even get a soda. Well,
Right.
believe it or not, that was one of the evolutions in the business. So when things turned into a tech business, like we did it the old fashioned way, like you were saying earlier with the sodas, you would keep them in your car, you accepted cash. There were a lot of little things. We took phone calls to get orders. And
Mhm.
over time, this is how society evolved. I don't even know what year it was, but somewhere in the middle there, the way we evolved was we started charging people $1 for the phone call, $2 for the phone call, $3 for the phone call. And every month we would monitor statistics. At the same time, we had created an app. So you were looking every month at how many telephone calls did we get, how many web orders did we get, and how many app orders did we get. And every month, the trend, of course, went more and more to the app, but it took
Mhm.
time, right?
Right.
And so think about where we were in society when you started playing around with iPhones and apps. And so over time, we were scared to do it, but essentially, excuse me, you get to the point where you don't take cash anymore because it becomes a logistical issue with the drivers collecting that. Drivers would steal cash, not bring it back to the office. There was always drivers that owed you money that disappeared. Sodas, sodas an item that are priced at a 400% profit. Okay, we would pay like 36 cents for a soda and sell them for whatever the math is there, right? And at the end of the month, just so you know, we broke even on sodas. That means 75% of your sodas got stolen by the drivers, right? So you're losing sodas, you're losing cash, and then you're taking phone calls while you're trying to force people to go online so you don't have to pay a whole room full of customer service reps, right? So that was the evolution. But believe it or not, nowadays the company we sold to that it finally evolved through didn't take cash, didn't take phone calls, and didn't sell sodas.
Wow.
That's a big
So
change.
now that you brought that up, I'm going to go ahead and get into Nashville. So when I left Orlando 2016, moved to Nashville, I went to go meet Tracy Barkley. That was over that location. I stayed with that location, and then maybe a year or so, because I only stayed like 3.5 years before I left. But Bike Squad. So Bike Squad acquired Doorstep Delivery, and so I let me say this before I get in before you get into your commentary about it. But with what I remember about Bike Squad, I remember they had maybe 2 to 3 Priuses at the Nashville location. And they let me and some of the other drivers, not every day, because we had to sign up or whatever to drive the Prius. So we used that vehicle to make deliveries, and they gave
Mm-hmm,
us a gas card to fill
mm-hmm,
up the gas or whatever, right?
mm-hmm,
But they, because we were employees
mm-hmm,
then, right, once they transferred over. And so I remembered when it was one day I was trying to get off at 7 o'clock because I had something prior that I scheduled and I needed to get that done. And I'll never forget, I think whatever area I was in, it was like 6:58 because we were told they had up to 6:59 to 7 o'clock to still send you an order. And so they sent me another order, and I'm like, no, I get off at 7 o'clock. And they were like, no, it's a big demand. We got to get these orders delivered. We need you to stay on. And I'm going back and forth with them on the phone. I'm like, no, I have somewhere to go. Now, do you think, okay, before I get into that question, I'm so sorry because I got a lot going on. Why did Bite Squad acquire Doorstep Delivery?
So let me clarify. So I would use the word merger. We
Okay.
merged with Bite Squad, and then we sold to a company called Waiter. So we did actually take on their name of Bite Squad, right? We basically came together at a time when Uber Eats and DoorDash and some of these other big companies were out there either public or being big private. Groupon had just bought a company called Order Up and had sunk a ton of money into that. And all of these companies were coming into Orlando guns blazing because if you don't know, Doorstep Orlando was the biggest doorstep that we ever had, and they wanted to come after the number one stunner to take over market share and try and squash us like a bug. Believe it or not, with Order Up, owned by Groupon, spending over $100,000 a month in Orlando, and we put them out of business. We had 9 competitors come in and try and put us out of business. 9. We squashed them all like a bug until the end when we took our money and went home. So I would say that this business is all in the execution. There were all these other people that tried to start up a restaurant delivery service and compete with us, and they just couldn't do it right. And to be frank, there was actually one here before us, but they did such a bad job of marketing, we didn't know they existed. If we knew that she existed, we never would have started the business in the first place, right? But she just didn't do a good enough job. We had big competitors that were well established in other markets trying to come in and compete with us, and we were relentless. This is where your entrepreneurship comes out. When Will and I used to say, when the going gets tough, we get going. And I mean, we would get in our cars every day and we were going around to all of our 500 restaurants in Orlando. Every time we'd see one pop up on somebody's website, we were there in 5 minutes to give somebody an incentive to stay with us, which was double-sided extra advertising and help. And if you don't, we're not going to work with you anymore. So it was, we were threatening all of our restaurants at the same time we were offering them extra free advertising to stay with us to put our competitors out of business. And we did it all the way up until Uber Eats and DoorDash came into play. And at that point, we said, we've either got to raise money or sell. And we did both. So it was actually Will who got on the horn and started calling other big competitors around the country and got a hold of Bite Squad. Arash, he got a hold of. And 3 days later, Arash was in our office and he said, I want to do a deal with you guys. And that's where it all began. And we said, all right, how can we put together our $25 million of sales and your $20 million of sales and raise money and go out there and light the world on fire? And essentially what we did was we knew that if we combined forces that somebody was willing to loan us $30 million. And so we did the deal, took the $30 million and then bought about 30 other restaurant delivery companies across the country, the biggest one in every city, or other ones to bolster the cities we already had, rebranded everything, and then packaged it and sold it to a public company called Waiter. And so that was the real
Wow.
payout. The real payout was Waiter, not Bite Squad.
You hear that, audience? You hear that? Pay attention. No, because we have like different Facebook groups and they discuss different things and blah, blah, blah. So now please share this video. If you watching right now on replay or the premiere, give it a thumbs up, share this. Now, Delivery Dudes was out too. I remember them like vaguely. What happened to them? Do you know?
So those guys were big down in South Florida in the Palm Beach
Okay.
area, I think, or Fort Lauderdale. We felt like they stole our double D's situation here.
I
It was started by the son of somebody, if I understand correctly, who
Theirs
kind of
was
started
behind.
what the
Theirs
D.
was, yeah, I think
Yeah,
the wings or
they,
something was behind it.
right. They did theirs differently. It was just funny when we were the first double D, and then you got DoorDash and delivery dudes and everyone coming out with these things, and we're just like, who do these guys think they are? And Amazon actually stole our slogan one time. And this is where you got to ask yourself, do you want to sue Amazon or not? Right. So like, I forget what it was, but basically, you know, something delivered to your door, your favorites delivered to your door or something. And we had it trademarked, and they stole it. And it's whatever Amazon still says, that's our slogan. But we just knew it was going to be a losing battle. And again, back to my comment earlier about legal, it becomes a leverage battle and who has more money, not who's right or wrong. So we just let Amazon have it.
Mm. Now, Order Up. Didn't Grubhub buy them as well?
Uh, Groupon bought them. Groupon bought Order Up. So Order Up started out of Gainesville and used to compete with Gator Food, our partner Tom.
Hmm.
And so they were good friends. We knew that guy. There were two guys with Order Up. They split off. One guy did his own thing, and one guy went with Groupon. And he made $9 million in the deal, and then got sued for a lot of money, and then they went out of business. So not quite sure how that story ends.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know why I thought Order Up was part of Grubhub,
Yeah,
okay,
no.
so go
We
ahead.
were part of an alliance with the six biggest restaurant delivery services in the country, and they all got bought by Grubhub except for us. I
Okay.
think all of them.
Now, I know with DoorDash and Uber Eats, sometimes they have to refund customers because they claim that they didn't receive their order when the drivers handed the order to them. Uh, did you ever have some type of operating budget or a budget for like refunds, credits back, or etc. for like the customers?
Yeah, so it's obviously part of the business, and when you say budget, it's we did not have a budget per se in the sense that we could give away X number of dollars every month. It's about I'm the numbers guy on our team, and basically there are certain things that needed to correlate or pay for itself. So there are a couple things that we get. What we make money on delivery fees, and the
Mhm.
portion that we make, the portion we make on the delivery fee, we are willing to give away in a discount or back to a customer if there's a problem.
Okay.
So, from a company's perspective, we're never trying to make a dollar off of anything except our commission with the restaurant. Everything else pays for itself. So back when we had Doorstep, and I'm guessing, Uber Eats and some of them are a little different, but we had rental fees
Mhm.
and different fees involved. So the rental fee was where the driver would rent the bag and the car topper, or maybe buy a shirt from me so that they could represent the company. When they did that, they were paid a little stipend in their per order fee to do that. But I was basically trying to take the money from that basket and just fill that basket. I didn't want any of that money. Just like with sodas, as I was getting at earlier, I wasn't trying to make money on sodas. I was just trying to make sure we didn't lose money on sodas. Um, so anyway, there are little things there that need to pay for themselves, and when they don't pay for themselves, then you're out of whack and something needs to change.
Okay.
So there's different kinds of there's a refund and there's discounts, and so the discounts and the refunds would usually equal what the profit would have been from the delivery fee. I'll just leave it there.
Okay. And so it wasn't often that you had to discount or refund
No, it
the
was
customer.
often. I mean, there's so much here, and I guess people. I don't know. I'm not sure who the audience is here, and what people are expecting, but we learned a lot from this business. And so we had 24 different markets, and the ones with the biggest complaints and the worst reviews and the most money given away for discounts were the best branches. They had the best growth. They made the most amount of money. They were self-sustainable. The drivers were happier. The restaurants were happier. The consistency was awesome. But this is where Orlando is running 2.5 hour delivery times and growing like wildfire. And then
Yeah.
conversely, Denver, Colorado. Denver,
Mhm.
Colorado had 30 of the best restaurants, 10 great drivers, and I'll say a very well experienced manager that was our partner there.
Mhm.
It was a tight ship. They didn't give away any money in discounts for upset customers. They didn't have any late deliveries. Their restaurants were thrilled, and we made $0. So there is definitely an eye-opening side to this business when you get in and you realize the difference in the correlations between quality and money are very different. And so then you got to ask yourself, as the owner of the company, do I want to be growing and serving 400 or 500 people a day in my little area? Or do I want to be perfect and only do 50 orders a day and make $0?
Interesting. No, that's good information. Wow,
All the
I'm
money in this business is at the top, right? Your first 30 orders a day that you do just pays for little costs. So think about it this way. Most companies make a 30% commission rate. You get 30 orders at a $30 average. You're bringing in about $270 in your first $1,000 of food sales a day, which just goes towards paying some fees. It's actually pretty hard to get north of 30 orders a day. And so a lot of people just don't make it there. And so it's one thing to look at a company like ours when we were doing $35 million or $200 million or $1 billion, like some of these other guys. For a small business like we were, you need to be doing over $1 million a year before it starts to generate a decent paycheck. So it's a tough business at the bottom. You got to be able to persevere through the challenging times to grow it big enough to where you can make your money on volume. And the bigger you get, the happier everybody is. The happier the drivers are because they've got consistent orders. They're driving shorter distances. They're, either taking doubles that are right next to each other or not at all. It is a much more efficient system when you have 30 drivers and 500 orders versus back to day one when we had 2 drivers on a shift and one didn't show up. That's 50% of your drivers, right? And so you go through all those evolutions, and yeah, it's crazy to realize, and this is one of the things I had to kind of teach people, was that it's not about being perfect. It's about always be growing. And so what does that mean? Part of what that means is, I understand you have a great relationship with the local awesome Mexican restaurant, but for the good of your business and your customers, you need to sign up the other Mexican restaurant too.
so it's not exclusive relationships.
Yeah. That's one of the other things that really evolved. So back in 2008, when we would have an agreement, a contract with the restaurant, it was an exclusive agreement. So it said they could not work with another restaurant delivery service other than Doorstep Delivery. And when some of these big guys started getting into the act, the Grubhubs or the DoorDash, of course, they're the third, fourth, fifth company through the door. So what are they going to say other than, we don't care if you work with anybody else? What? That guy won't let you work with other people? That's crazy. And you're like, yeah, that's because you're not the first one there, right? So when we had the exclusive agreement, I will tell you, I was naive to believe that, even just 10 years ago, that our exclusive contracts were enough to solidify this business and protect us. We learned when it became a tech business, with that big shift, everything changed. And we realized pretty quickly that the restaurants don't care about your agreement. They just care about the money. And it's how much leverage do you really have or not have. And that's where basically our best defense about preventing other services to getting into our area was telling a restaurant, you want to work with him? Okay, but I'm not sending you any more orders. So good luck. And that's how you play the game.
Wow. Okay. Now, speaking of working with restaurants, I think you kind of mentioned that you took like a 30% commission, and then like a marketing fee. So now Doorstep, DoorDash and Uber Eats, they created ghost kitchens with some of the chain restaurants. So if it's Denny's, what they do is they created a ghost kitchen or two, and now they're charging 30% on the main restaurant, Denny's. And then there are 1 to 2 to 3 ghost kitchens that are attached to that
Yep.
business, 30, 30, 30. So they're getting all this money. Now, did the restaurants ever complain about 30? So was it okay? Was it 30% per order, or was it 30% per total? Was it 30% per month? What was it?
Well, it's all the same. 30% of the food total. The food total. So you got to understand, restaurants typically make a 10% profit. So when we walk in and, if you said, can I have a 30% discount? The answer is no. Will actually got thrown out of a restaurant once. One guy he was the one who asked for 30%. The guy goes, you, my friend, you get out. He's in Baldwin Park. It was awesome. Some people just don't get it. So really what we were was educators. So we had to educate the restaurant on why it made sense to give us 30%. Michelle, let me just ask you, may I take a 1 minute break, or are we just rolling all
No,
the way
yeah,
through?
go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Thanks.
So while Andrew is taking a break, I received the email from Will, and because he's on Central Standard Time, which Chicago, and this is Eastern Time, he got the times mixed up. Now we did create this schedule. We actually scheduled this probably maybe less than a month ago. And so both of them are pretty busy. So I'm glad that I have Andrew. I will have Will on maybe as a part two. And then I'll give you a part two of, because then he can probably say things that we didn't talk about with Andrew. All I was doing was telling him about Will, that I received the email.
Yeah, I got you in my ears.
Oh, okay. So we'll probably do that part with Will as a part two. And then if Andrew, if you have time, you can jump on and say, hey, yeah, I didn't say that, because I might, throw in another question or whatever.
It's
But
funny how two people can look back on the same event and have a very different recollection of what happened.
yes, I agree. Okay, so thank you, audience, for being patient on a 1 minute break. I appreciate that. So we know that whether you're food delivery, grocery package, or warehouse delivery, there are three, I call them categories. There are three categories of people. So you have the drivers, you have the customers, and you have the merchants, which you call them restaurants. But now they're called merchants because you have grocery,
Hmm.
food, and retail that falls under merchants.
Hmm.
My question is, out of all three categories, if you can rank them, and you don't have to, if you had to rank these three categories of people, who would you say come first, second, and third?
Between, sorry, the restaurant, the customer, and
And the
the
drivers.
merchant, wait, and the drivers. Say who comes first.
So you
Uh,
have, yeah.
in reality, the customer and the restaurant are both your customers. Uh, you have a business relationship with the restaurant, so you're able to talk to them in a business manner where things need to make sense, right? The customers sometimes can be irrational. When customers are hangry, and we're late with their food and we screw it up and
Mhm.
it's cold and we forgot their sauce or they have no utensils to eat it with, they get very angry. Um, so when you say who's more important, e- everybody's important, but at the end of the day, it's not a perfect situation for anybody. You do the best you can with each of them, and without any one of those people, you don't have a business. So I'll tell you from a driver's perspective, when Order Up came into town, and as I mentioned, they were trying to spend $100,000 to put us out of business a month. One of the things they did is they offered to pay our drivers $100 a day to not work for us, to not work for their competitor. That's it. Here's $100. Don't drive for that guy. Could you imagine? So we had 400 orders coming in a day, and they were picking off our drivers and trying to pay them to not deliver the food. I mean, that's how cutthroat it got. But it shows you the power of the driver. So we always said, when you look at this business, you say, who wins? Who wins this business? The company that controls the drivers wins the business. That's why we used to say that Uber had a huge advantage over us. And that's where you go, uh-oh, they've already got drivers everywhere. That's frightening. They could flip a switch and put us out of business. And that's when we knew we had to raise money and get on a bigger team. And we didn't just get on a bigger team, we created a bigger team with a merger, raising money, and buying 30 companies. And we didn't just buy 30 companies with money, we bought 30 companies with a couple dollars and a dream. And then we fulfilled that dream. So all of like when we did a merger with Bite Squad, there was no money. That was no money. That was a combining of two businesses.
Okay.
The money came so we raised money, then we would use a fraction of that money to give another restaurant delivery service basically like a down payment, and then the rest they got in stock in our company with the hope that we were going to sell the business and turn that into money for them. And sure enough, when we did the deal with Waiter, it was a $321 million transaction. That's when it became a good deal for everybody.
Mm. So, drivers, if you're watching right now on Premiere or replay, I hope you just heard what he just said about the drivers. I know, and I know that we had drivers movements in the past where certain holidays we didn't drive for Uber, Lyft, or we didn't do food deliveries because we were trying to make a point. But it didn't work because the areas were so oversaturated. So I feel like the companies, DoorDash, Uber Eats, and the rest of them won. Now that I started this customers and drivers movement, I'm working with customers. So it's a little bit different and it's going to take time to grow. DoorDash has partnered with Fresno Logistics, and now they're trying to go away with independent contractors and actually have W-2 delivery drivers. Do you think moving independent contractors, delivery drivers to W-2 delivery drivers will work for the gig apps in the long term or the long run?
So there's a couple details there that are very important. Uh, so from a basic perspective, a restaurant delivery service would need to be very large to be able to support W-2 drivers. So we actually transitioned to W-2 drivers when we merged with Bite Squad. And at that point, we were finally an enormous company, doing about $60 million of business. And we were able to sustain it. Now, when I say we're $60 million, people who don't understand the finances say, wow, if you're making $60 million, of course you can pay the drivers. The margins in this business are razor thin. And if there's one thing I just want to impress upon you from the way you stated the question, you can't be looking at the company to solve your problem. The company is always going to be doing the best they can with the customer. They're always going to raise their prices as high as they can get away with from the customer, right? They're not leaving money on the table there to screw somebody else. But then the problem is there just isn't the money in the business model. The problem is the business model and the finances don't work well for both sides. And so all the little companies, the little restaurant delivery services, there isn't enough consistent business to bring enough money to the driver for it to be a full-time job for the driver. So usually the person that ends up in that spot is somebody who wants to do a couple orders during lunch and a couple orders during dinner or work on a Sunday night to get a little bit of extra money. But the ability to look at that as a consistent paycheck, if you were doing full-time work for a restaurant delivery service that was relatively new, there just wouldn't be the consistency in money to support the driver or the company, right? The company knows that they're not going to make any money for a while. For us, it was 1 year. 1 year we made $0. What really got us out of that hole was we got one huge corporate client called EA Sports that makes the video games, and they ordered a couple $1,000s every single day, and that changed our whole world and created our marketing budget and allowed us to flourish and blossom. But at the beginning, the finances, just like any small business in America, when it's tiny, the finances don't make sense. You can't pay your rent. You can't take a salary. You can't do anything. You've got to get to be doing over 50 orders a day to do anything. And really, you got to be doing over 100 or 200 orders a day to make any money. And so there's just a lot of restriction around the whole thing. And we would ask ourselves time and time again, what would a customer pay to have their food delivered? We played around with so many different models. We played around with like a flat $5 or flat $10 model where it's like, would the customer pay it? Would the driver be happy with their part of that? And you run all these different scenarios. And at the end of the day, that's why you want to get into the catering and the bigger orders and raise your average order fee so that the tips are bigger to your drivers. The bigger you get, you can shrink the delivery zone so they're driving less, which means a driver does more orders per hour, uses less gas, less wear and tear on their car, and more tips. Right. So that is a huge bunch of variables that will be handled one way in Orlando, Florida, in my company, and will be handled very differently somewhere else. Like you mentioned, driving 30 miles to deliver a smoothie or something for Uber. I've heard other people doing that. And they
Yes.
feel like they're going to lose their job if they don't do it, even though they feel like they're losing money by spending more on gas than they're getting from the deal. One of the things in the independent contractor relationship is that if we ever got audited, we would have had to have shown a stack of orders that were refused by drivers. And believe it or not, that's helpful to the company to be able to show the auditor or the regulating body that, sure enough, drivers declined an order, they didn't get fired, and the world just moves on. Right. So that is a thing that people had to be aware of as well back when this attorney group was suing every company in the business.
Now, are you a customer of any of the gig apps?
Rarely. So I'm cheap. It doesn't, well, it's two things. I always say I'm cheap, but it's not really that. It's that, believe it or not, I love my interaction with all of the restaurant owners. So you can imagine in this business, we created relationships with everybody everywhere. And I'm the kind of guy who likes to walk in and go, "Hey, Johnny, what's going on?" And that reminds me of Anthony's Pizza, Johnny, right?
Yes,
That
that was the
that's
spot.
what I enjoy doing. And it's funny because, of course, when I was on the other side, I would sell why everybody should be, paying to have their food delivered. It's more efficient. You can save time, spend your time with your family, work more, right? Create more production at work while somebody else is dealing with the food. There's so many reasons why people should order delivery. I think in real life, sometimes people want some alone time. Sometimes they want 10 minutes to drive to the store alone without being bothered, right? And picking up dinner and bringing it home. And, I guess I fall more into that category where I like my alone time, my interaction with the restaurant owners, and I don't want to spend an extra 10 to 15 bucks to have it delivered because I'm also questioning whether it's going to be hot or not.
Good
I
answer.
did I did use my doorstep delivery bags that you were talking about for Halloween. We had a Halloween party and
Mm,
we bought a bunch of pizzas. And so I pulled out one of my old catering bags and picked up the pizzas picked them up right before the party from right down the street and put them in my double thick thermal insulated bags with hot and cool compartments and put them on the bar here until everyone showed up.
that's what I'm talking about. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but DoorDash and Uber Eats pay their drivers $2 base pay. The only way the base pay is increased, it depends on different factors, but the two of the factors I'm going to mention I'm sorry, if it's considered long distance, like with the miles, not now, you're not getting $30 for 30 miles, but they would try, I know with DoorDash, they would try at least if it's like maybe a 10-mile order and the customer didn't leave a tip or had a low ball tip, $1.50 or whatever, they would try to add a few more dollars to make it attractive for me or another driver to pick it up. And then the other will probably be like, it's been sitting for so long and they need to hurry up and get it delivered. So they'll throw some money on it to get it
Mhm.
delivered. Have you ever, and I don't remember it, have you ever decreased the, I don't want to say base pay, but the driver's pay? I can't remember, but have you ever done
No,
that?
no, we never had any playing around with that. The way we did it, we drivers were independent contractors that got a certain amount per order. And I guess just from a legal perspective, if your audience is curious how this comes together, from a legal perspective on an independent contractor relationship, 100% of the delivery fee is owned by the delivery driver. And then technically the delivery driver should be
Say
paying
that again.
the a hundred
Say that.
percent of 100% of the delivery fee is owned by the driver. Okay, it is from a legal perspective with a independent contractor relationship. Now, then there's more to it though. Then the independent contractor needs to pay the company to be a finder to find them the order, right? So in my scenario, I'll just give you
Mhm.
how it all worked. $3.99 delivery fee from the customer goes directly to the driver. The driver turns around and pays the company $1 to find the order for them. The company turns around and pays the driver 25 cents to wear their logo on their shirt and 25 more cents to put the car topper on their car. And that's how the back and forth goes from a legal perspective with an independent contractor relationship. There may be fewer and fewer of those around because of all these attorneys that are trying to sue everybody. So most people, and what really happens is it just puts all the little guys out of business, and then you're left with a couple big companies like DoorDash and Uber Eats, and then they have all the power. And then the question is, are they going to be responsible with that power and treat their drivers appropriately or not?
I'm smiling because I'm so happy we had this interview because I would never, ever have the ability to have a sit down conversation with Dara, who is the CEO of Uber, or I call him Tony DoorDash, but Tony Shu. I would never have the opportunity to have a conversation with them like this because they're so untouchable. Thank you for being, because you didn't have to do this. You could have been like, oh, I don't have that company anymore. I don't want to talk about it or whatever, or I'm too busy or whatever. Thank you so much because now that sends signal that you are a relatable person and you actually cared about the drivers. That's my opinion. Now, somebody else watching this, they're probably saying, well, oh, Mico, maybe this is what he wanted to do. But what the correlation, what I'm trying to do is paint the picture that when you have a CEO, I don't want to say he's bragging, but when he says that he makes $43 million and you pay your independent contractor delivery drivers freaking $2 base pay, it's something wrong with that picture. It's
Mm-hmm.
something very wrong with that picture. So I know that, of course, drivers want to get paid more and to have it go up and not down. But I feel that these companies, and even though I still work with them, um, I just don't think it's fair to treat the drivers the way they've been treating. Like I said in the beginning, it was great. But along the way, when they had lawsuits, when they had pet projects that they had to pay for, they wrote in their business model that they were trying to get rid of independent contractors in the first place because they created drones to start doing deliveries until they figure out you couldn't put a case of water on a drone. Then they had the delivery robots in certain big cities, and then they figure out that they couldn't put cases of water or anything heavy in the inside of the delivery robot to have it to go up 3 flights of stairs with no elevator. So you need humans to be able to move deliver these deliveries. So now to still move us out of the way of independent contractors, now you're partnering with a company that's going to hire W2 employee delivery drivers. I just don't understand it. It's one thing, yes, you start a company to make money. You're a business. You need to make money. But it's one thing you can't just, excuse my language, shit on everybody to stay at the top. You either gonna have to save your company, you're gonna either have to change your lifestyle. It's not fair for you to, and I get it, you work hard, but $43 million as the CEO, and then your drivers, you're paying them the least amount. And if you could go down to free and only rely on tips, of course they would do so if they could.
So I don't know the finances extremely well of DoorDash, but it's a public company, right? So I'll just mention public companies are very different from private companies. So when you have a private company, that's all your cash flow, and you need to make things like the delivery fees pay. So when I brought in rental fees from the drivers. I created a basket of money, and when it got big enough, I would go out and buy more equipment. I would buy more car toppers and more bags, right? And that's how we paid for that stuff. So everything had to pay for something, and every dollar is maxed out. With a public company, they're getting a lot of their value from what they're doing with the stock based on growth and getting into different things. And their money is not necessarily coming from profits from the delivery side. They're coming from what they're doing on the corporate side. So if you look at the books of DoorDash, I, if you look at an order and how the finances break down on that order, I'd be very curious to know what their margins are. The margins in this business are tough. When we got to the end, we were at about a 21% break even point. And a lot of the restaurants have given a lot of pushback on 30%, and a lot of the restaurants are now at 25%. And Bite Squad actually voluntarily went to 25% to try and create a better relationship. So there's literally like a 4% margin on a lot of this stuff. And so I don't know specifically how much business DoorDash is doing, a lot, right? But it's a razor thin margin. And so when you then translate that margin from that order onto what you specifically did at the driver, if you were to take all of the profit from that order, I think you'd still be upset. That's not where their money's coming from.
Okay.
But I understand what you're saying. On the other side, there, like you said, the customer's the most important one. Basically, if the customer doesn't pay for it, then there's then that's it. Driver, same thing. They're gonna do this. There's a point when people complain, and then there's a point when people leave. They don't care about the point when people complain.
Mm-hmm.
They care about when you leave. That's when it matters to them, right? Because their goal as a company is, how can I provide this service more efficiently and less expensively? So if they can find somebody else who's willing to do it for less with the same quality, that's what they want to do. And in a tough economy, they've got even more leverage because there's more people looking for an interim job or a part-time job, second job, etc. So when economies are bad, it's hard on the drivers, even more hard on the drivers.
Okay. So I have two photos I want to show the audience and show you. These were the early days of you look so
Nice.
cute.
So that's actually at my house. When we first started, out of a spare bedroom upstairs was where the dispatcher was, and all the driver's equipment was in the garage. And that's where we met Michelle on day one. And yeah, I think that's from right inside the house.
And then I have a second photo. I was somewhere, I just did a delivery. And I was like, let me, take a photo. So
Nice.
that's the topper. And I have my name tag on there. I can't find my name tag now. It's packed up somewhere, but I do have it. And
I think
I
you
don't
owe us
know.
$1 for that or something, right?
I'm right. So as we are winding down or coming to a close, I have one more thing to ask, and then you can uh, close out with like what have you been doing since you left DSD? Um, do you think if and DSD for the people coming in late, doorstep delivery? If do you think if doorstep delivery was around today, do you think they would have created partnerships with, grocery stores, alcohol? and then like warehouse package deliveries for
So,
businesses.
so as I was saying earlier, things really changed when, well, I didn't really get too far into this, but Grubhub used to be just a portal, just a website. They didn't deliver anything, right? They would partner with companies like mine. I would give them 2,500 restaurants and
Mm.
I would do the delivery, but the order would come in through their website and be sent to us. And therefore, they got the majority of the commission and we got some of the commission. At one point, Grubhub just flipped the switch and said, hey, guess what? Next week, we're going to start doing our own deliveries. We don't need you anymore. And thanks for showing us who all the good restaurants are. And so then they were able to walk into those restaurants and say, by the way, we've been bringing you X number of orders that Doorstep's been bringing you for the last however many months. So they very easily signed them up. And at that point, we knew that things had to change. Um, at that point, we realized our days were numbered, and we were working on a bunch of backup plans. And so, as I mentioned previously, we knew we had to either raise money or get on a bigger team. But what I didn't mention is we had a third option.
Mhm.
We were building another software. What
Mm.
nobody has ever seen is the coolest thing ever. So we built something like Uber, but better. So we built a company that had different verticals for food, pharmaceuticals, even had massage therapists,
Don't give them no
barbers.
ideas.
Yeah, the whole thing. The software was self-sustainable, and the drivers were the most important part. So let me tell you how this works. So the drivers bring on other drivers. They get commissions on all of the deliveries that the other drivers they bring on get, and they get coupon codes and give them out and get a cut of the food total when their coupons are used. And the software was like self-dispatching like Uber. So essentially it didn't require anybody on this side. The drivers, all we had to do was create the relationship with the merchant. And we even had incentives for drivers to do that, right? If you can bring on a merchant, you will get 1% of their sales forever, right? That kind of thing. And then it's you bring on another driver, you get 1% of their sales forever, right? And now you hand out your coupon code and you get 5% of that forever, right? And so we basically set up a self sustaining model in all of those different, I call them verticals. And the drivers were the lifeblood of the entire thing. And then we got bought for $300 million and we put it on the shelf and haven't looked at it since.
Wow. Okay. This has been a great conversation. I am so happy that I kept in touch, right? Over the years, I would like send an email or, whatever. And I'm thank you so much for being here
Yeah,
and giving this great insight because I guarantee you, whoever is going to watch this interview, if they're interested in building a company, maybe they can reach out to you to be mentored. Because I'm telling you, I don't know if you still mentor like entrepreneurs or small
sure we
business
do.
owners to
Mm-hmm.
get started.
Mm-hmm.
Um, guys, I'm telling you, make sure this is Andrew. I would do another part two with him. But if you can go ahead and close out and kind of tell the audience what you've been doing since the departure of DSD, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I think one of the things we learned was that you always need to be growing. And we were married to this business for what felt like 15 years, almost 15 years. And we went through some good times, some challenges, some scary times. We didn't know quite what was going to happen for the last 2 years or so. And then we had a good hit when we sold. Then we even had a little bit of bad luck after that. So there's always going to be twists and turns. Now, a lot of the audience is looking at this saying, yeah, you're a restaurant delivery service. That's not very special. Anyone could have done that. Now rewind in your brain to 2007 when we really started organizing this thing and before iPhones. And to be frank, nobody had heard of these services at the time. And so the one thing I hear all the time is, where do you come up with these ideas? Over different time, been involved in lots of different things. I'll give Will full credit here. Doorstep delivery was his idea. I just came in to say, figure out if we could make money and then jump in to try and make it better. But I've always got involved on things that are at the cusp of becoming something much bigger. I like to get behind a trend in its earliest stages and then kind of be a pioneer and build it out until it gets to a certain point. And after we sold Doorstep, I took about 2 years off and COVID hit and all of that. Just focused on family, moving, and lots of stuff like that, playing a lot of hockey with the Doorstep delivery hockey team. I got to show you those jerseys at one point.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Okay.
oh, yeah, we won championships. I had them up on billboards and everything just for fun. We had a good time with it. We called ourselves the Double Ds, of course. But as as life evolves, right now I'm the CEO of a young public company called Global Innovative Platforms, which focuses on animal breath analytics. We are working on technology that allows us to test for heartworms in dogs and other diseases through breath, as well as monitor medication effectiveness or treatment effectiveness. Can also detect mold on animal food, and lastly can determine whether there are problems in air quality inside of different animal environments like a chicken coop or a horse stall or a kennel or anything like that. So we launched about a year ago, and things are really starting to crank, and we're going to start making some public announcements here shortly. So look out for the ticker GIPL, Animal Breath Analytics, coming on strong.
Okay. Are you on any social media that they can
I
follow
am.
you?
I'm on Instagram. My handle is that Foggin guy. I used to have a fogging company. And then just Andrew Brown on Facebook. Nothing serious there. But yeah, just follow me at that Foggin guy on Instagram, and you'll see the latest from what happens in my neck of the woods here in Florida.
Okay. I will make sure that I'll get that information so I can have it in a description below so people can click on the link and go to it. All right.
Well, thank
So,
you so much, Michelle. Yeah, really
yeah,
appreciate being here.
yeah, no problem. So as I do the final closeout, I want to say thank you for everyone who took the time out to come and stop by this premiere and give me a thumbs up. And then to leave a comment. So if you have comments for Andrew, make sure you leave them below. Also, I want to say this interview has opened my eyes to a lot of different things, right? So, as I mentioned before, with the customers and drivers movement, I learned a lot today in this interview. And I know at the time when whether I was the first delivery driver or when I came back, I never really had this time. I saw you and Will, but I never had this time to like talk, right? Because you trying to get things done and I had a schedule or whatever. But to take this time now to be able to come forward and say, wow, this is what happened to the company. This is what we did. This is so interesting. It's touching my heart because I
It,
want
it,
people
it
to know that you're not untouchable.
we're just regular people. It took an army of people that were willing to work really hard constantly for 15 years. It kind of takes being fueled by a passion and attacking your goal every day with the mindset that you're going to get better, you're going to get better, you're going to get better. And when danger comes in, you better step up and protect what you've built. And we called it the wild monster because with a business you get to the point where at the beginning you're building a business, and one day the business has a life of its own. And then it's up to you to control the business. And really, what that is when you have enough business flowing through and things are growing on their own, then you're battling against problems constantly, right? And that's when it's the wild monster that needs to be tamed, when every day you're recognizing something that needs to be worked on or a competitor trying to come into the space. There's never a dull moment. And if you ever think that you're comfortable, you're either in the wrong business or you're about to get slaughtered. So, you cannot just get things to a certain point and coast. If there's one final message I'll leave everybody with, it's that you've never arrived on this earth. You got to try and get better every single day and become the best version of yourself. And that over time is going to make you the most proud of who you are and give you the most confidence to take on additional challenges that you would have never dreamed of, and teach yourself that you can do things that you didn't know you were capable of. It starts one step at a time, and building that confidence in yourself that you're going to do what you tell yourself you're going to do from a disciplined basis, and chase your dream and not worry when you're tired or achy or not feeling well. You're going to do it anyway, and failure is not an option. And that's how Will and I approached it. Failure was never an option. We got going when the going got rough. We used to joke sometimes and say sometimes good things happen to good people, and then everything would fall apart the next day. We grinded. We grinded. And even after we sold, we grinded, and now we're grinding again. So I think if there's a lesson I learned in life, it's that you always got to keep growing and keep your foot on the gas pedal.
And I will leave you with this: drivers, customers, and merchants are all important. See you guys in
Yes,
the
they
next
are.
interview.